You probably think your thoughts are your own, right? But what if they're not? What if society, media, and culture have been shaping what you believe and want without you even knowing? You're not as in control as you think. Here's the unthinkable reality of your mind. People love to believe they're free thinkers, making choices based on logic, reason, and personal preference. But here's the reality. Most of their beliefs, desires, and opinions are just echoes of the world around them, influenced by media, authority figures, and social norms. The illusion of independent thought is one of the greatest tricks ever played, and the scariest part is that most people never even realize they're caught in it. Let's take fashion trends as an example. Someone might swear they wear a certain style because they genuinely like it, but rewind a few years, and that same person probably thought the trend was ridiculous. Remember the early 2000s? Baggy jeans and chunky sneakers were everywhere. Then, out of nowhere, skinny jeans became the must-have look. Fast forward to today, suddenly baggy styles are back, while the skinny fits people once defended are being tossed aside. So, did personal preference really change, or did the trend decide for them? Psychologists have been scratching their heads over this for decades. One of the wildest experiments, led by Solomon Asch in the 1950s, proved just how much we humans love to follow the herd, even when the herd is obviously wrong. Here's what went down. People were shown a bunch of lines and asked to pick the longest one. Easy, right? Well, not so fast. The other participants were actually actors who confidently pointed at the wrong line. And guess what? The real participants, despite having perfectly good eyes, started second-guessing themselves and went along with the nonsense. Why? Because the fear of standing out made them question reality itself. Turns out, peer pressure doesn't just make you wear ugly trends, it can mess with your brain too. And this kind of influence extends far beyond fashion or simple experiments. History is full of moments where entire societies were shaped by external manipulation. Think about World War II. Nazi propaganda didn't just spread ideas, it convinced millions to adopt extremist ideologies, turning ordinary citizens into devoted followers of a destructive regime. In the Soviet Union, state-controlled media rewrote history in real time, ensuring that whatever the government declared as truth became truth. And today, the battlefield has shifted to social media and 24-hour news cycles. What people believe to be their own thoughts are often the result of carefully crafted narratives designed to guide opinions in a particular direction. Ever wonder if your opinions are really yours? Most of the time, they're not. Take food trends. A decade ago, nobody cared about avocado toast. Now, it's practically a personality trait. Not because avocados magically got tastier, but because influencers and brands made it a must-have. The same thing happens with music and TV. Ever notice how some songs just happen to go viral, or how suddenly everyone is obsessed with the same show? That's not a coincidence, that's conditioning. The more we see or hear something, the more we like it. It's not just a preference, it's programming. And the wild part? Most people never realize it. They think they're making independent choices, when really, they're just following a script someone else wrote. If reality is a stage, the media is the director, deciding which stories get told, how they're framed, and what emotions they should trigger. Most people assume they consume news, entertainment, and social media on their own terms. But in reality, these platforms don't just inform, they program. They shape not just what we think about, but how we think about it. And the secret weapon? Repetition. Psychologists call it the illusory truth effect. The more you hear something, the more likely you are to believe it, even if it's false. That's why political slogans stick, why some headlines dominate for weeks, and why companies spend billions on ads. If it's everywhere, it feels like the truth. This is the core of agenda-setting theory. The media may not tell you what to think, but it absolutely controls what you think about. Ever wonder why some scandals stay in the news for months while others disappear overnight? Or why do some tragedies spark global outrage while others barely make a headline? That's not random. It's a carefully constructed reality, one where the loudest stories shape the world and the inconvenient ones fade like they never even happened. Real-life examples of media-driven narratives are everywhere. Take the 2003 Iraq War. Before the invasion, major news networks repeated one message relentlessly, and that was weapons of mass destruction. People heard it so often that they accepted it as fact. Years later, no such weapons were found. But by then, public opinion had already been manipulated into supporting the war. And today, social media amplifies this effect even further, spreading misinformation at lightning speed. Think about it. How many times have you seen a viral claim and believed it, only to find out later that it wasn't true? And it's not just politics. Entertainment is shaping minds too. Consider the explosion of true crime content. A decade ago, serial killers were figures of horror. Now, they're the stars of Netflix documentaries, the subjects of podcasts, even romanticized by some online communities. The crimes didn't change, but the way people felt about them did. Isn't that strange? Even personal opinions aren't as independent as they seem. A person might strongly agree with an outrage campaign without ever researching the issue themselves. They might believe they love a fashion trend, never realizing it was planted in their mind through advertising. So here's the question: how much of what people think is truly theirs? The truth is going to make me a bit uncomfortable. The media shapes perception far more than most people realize. It decides which issues matter, how events are framed, and even what emotions people attach to them. And as long as people consume information passively, they'll keep mistaking media-driven narratives for their own independent thoughts. So, are people really thinking for themselves? If the media is the director of perception, then culture is the silent engineer, programming people's minds before they are even aware of it. From birth, individuals are handed a set of beliefs, values, and social norms that shape their worldview. And the strangest part? Most never stop to question them. But here's something to think about. How many of these so-called truths are just cultural hand-me-downs? Every society runs on invisible rules, unwritten laws that dictate what's acceptable, desirable, or even possible. People don't consciously choose them, they absorb them, like a computer running on pre-installed software. In some cultures, success is measured by wealth and status. In others, it's about family and tradition. Some glorify independence, while others prioritize community. But who decided these rules, and why do people follow them so blindly? Ancient rulers didn't just control people with laws, they controlled them with beliefs. The Egyptians convinced their people that pharaohs were living gods. Chinese emperors claimed the mandate of heaven, implying divine approval. And medieval Europe, the church held absolute power, and questioning religious doctrine was dangerous. Sounds extreme, right? But before laughing at the past, think about today. People still accept social hierarchies, follow unwritten rules of what's normal, and rarely challenge the beliefs they grew up with. So the real question is how much of what we believe is actually ours. Even today, many cultural beliefs are so deeply ingrained that they seem like universal truths until someone from another culture points out how bizarre they are. For example, why do Western societies consider eye contact a sign of confidence, while in many Asian cultures, avoiding eye contact is a sign of respect? Why is it normal in some places to greet people with a handshake, while in others, kissing on both cheeks is expected? These behaviors feel completely natural to those raised in them, but to an outsider, they can seem weird, even absurd. And then there are cultural norms that make no logical sense but are still followed religiously. For instance, many people celebrate birthdays with a cake topped with flaming wax sticks because they are following the trends. Or take the superstition that walking under a ladder brings bad luck. Logically, it's just a piece of wood leaning against a wall, but cultural programming has convinced people to avoid it at all costs. And what about the idea that wearing white after Labor Day is a fashion crime? Who decided that? No one knows, but people follow it anyway. The reality is that culture installs its default settings early in life, shaping what people believe is right, wrong, normal, or strange. And unless these settings are questioned, they remain invisible, guiding behavior without conscious thought. So the question is, how many of the things people believe are actually theirs, and how many are just part of the programming? Humans have an innate tendency to follow authority figures, whether it's a teacher, a doctor, or a politician. It's hardwired into their psychology, and while it can be a source of stability, it also makes them vulnerable to manipulation. One of the most famous experiments that explored this obedience to authority was the Milgram experiment, conducted in the 1960s by psychologist Stanley Milgram. The study was designed to measure how far people would go in following authority, even when it meant inflicting harm on others. Now, think that you're in a lab, and a researcher in a lab coat tells you to give increasingly severe electric shocks to a person every time they answer a question wrong. Sounds crazy, right? But in a famous experiment, that's exactly what happened. Even though the actor on the other side of the room was screaming in pain, many participants continued to follow orders, administering shocks at dangerous levels. The result? A shocking 65% of them went all the way to the highest shock level, simply because an authority figure told them to. Can you believe it? The power of authority was enough to override basic human compassion and common sense. Now, let's fast forward to today. That same psychological principle is at work, especially with experts, politicians, and influencers. People are naturally inclined to trust authority figures, whether that's a doctor in a white coat or a polished influencer with millions of followers. It's hardwired into us. In uncertain times, we look to those perceived as knowledgeable or powerful to lead us. That's why politicians often roll out expert endorsements to back their policies, or why influencers can persuade millions to buy a product or adopt a mindset even without solid proof. Think about how easy it is to be swayed by a doctor in a commercial or a celebrity endorsing a product. When they speak, their opinions just feel more valid. Why? Because they've got that psychological authority, whether it's credentials, a uniform, or a huge platform. And guess what? We're wired to follow them, often without questioning too much. Authority figures don't just tell us what to think, they shape what we believe, even if we don't realize it. One striking example of blind obedience to authority is the public's response to health advice during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. Experts, politicians, and the media delivered conflicting messages. Wear masks, don't wear masks, lockdown, reopen, and in many cases, the public followed these directives without understanding the underlying science or questioning inconsistencies. Some governments initially downplayed the severity of the virus, and many citizens blindly trusted their leaders, even when it led to disastrous consequences. For instance, in some regions, large gatherings were allowed while the threat of the virus spread rapidly. Could people have acted differently if they questioned the authority figures? It's hard to say, but the power of authority undoubtedly played a role in shaping public behavior. This is a prime example of how authority figures, whether they are in a white coat or standing behind a podium, can shape public opinion and behavior. Their influence is powerful, often bypassing critical thinking. This psychological impulse to trust authority makes people vulnerable to manipulation, which is why it's crucial to learn how to question authority, not out of disrespect, but out of a desire to form independent, informed beliefs. Humans are inherently social creatures, and while this has its benefits, it also means they are vulnerable to peer pressure and groupthink, two powerful forces that shape opinions and behaviors without people even realizing it. The need to fit in and avoid social rejection runs deep in the human psyche, often causing individuals to make choices they wouldn't normally make. But what makes conformity so strong? The answer lies in the brain's reward system, which is wired to seek out social validation. From an evolutionary standpoint, social cohesion was vital for survival. Belonging to a group provided safety, access to resources, and protection. Over time, the brain evolved to reward individuals for aligning with social norms and for receiving approval from others. When people conform to group expectations, their brain releases dopamine, the feel-good chemical associated with pleasure and satisfaction. Simply put, the brain is wired to reward conformity, making it feel like the right thing to do, even when it isn't. This dopamine rush is what keeps people wanting to fit in, even when it means going against their own preferences or beliefs. Take groupthink, the tendency for a group to make decisions that discourage creativity or individuality in favor of consensus. It's the reason why, in high-pressure situations, people often abandon their own judgments and follow the majority opinion. It's as if the desire for harmony within a group becomes more important than the truth. Can you think of a time when you've gone along with something just because everyone else was doing it? It's a lot easier to follow the herd than to stand out, and that's exactly what makes groupthink so pervasive. But perhaps the most powerful force at play is the fear of social rejection. Humans have an almost primal need to be accepted by their peers. This fear can be so intense that people will change their behavior, opinions, and even their identity to fit in. Whether it's a group of friends or a larger society, the fear of being left out or ridiculed can lead to conformity without even realizing it. After all, who wants to be the odd one out? Take, for example, viral trends. People might see something popular online like a dance challenge or a fashion trend and feel compelled to participate, even if they secretly find it ridiculous, because everyone else is doing it. The brain's need for social validation is so powerful that it can override personal preferences. Ever wonder why millions of people joined in on the planking trend, where people lay face down in random places for photos? Let's be real, it didn't make much sense, and yet people did it anyway, simply because it was a social phenomenon. It was fun at first, but it also highlighted the powerful influence of social feedback loops. Humorously, another trend that everyone seemed to follow was the selfie stick craze. People walked around with long poles just to take photos of themselves from a further distance, all in the name of looking cool or adventurous. Sure, it may have felt a bit ridiculous, but did that stop anyone from hopping on the bandwagon? Absolutely not. It wasn't about liking the trend, it was about joining in with the crowd. The truth is, the brain's desire for social validation and acceptance can be so strong that it leads people to conform in ways that don't make logical sense. Whether it's following viral trends, agreeing with the group's opinions, or adapting to cultural norms, people are constantly influenced by the feedback loop of social approval. And unless they are consciously aware of this influence, it can be hard to break free from the grip of social conformity. So how many of the things people do are genuinely their own choices, and how many are just a reflection of what the group is doing? The first step in escaping the thought matrix is simply through awareness. People often walk through life with their minds operating on autopilot, shaped by external forces like media, culture, and societal norms. But here's the thing. Awareness is the key that unlocks the door to reclaiming control over your own thoughts. The moment someone starts to question why they believe something or where their opinions truly come from is the moment they begin to take back their mental autonomy. The power of questioning everything is transformative. Ask yourself, why do I believe this? Is this my thought, or was it programmed into me by someone else? This type of self-inquiry might feel uncomfortable at first. After all, questioning deeply ingrained beliefs can be unsettling. It's easier to accept the status quo, to follow what everyone else believes without really thinking about it. But in reality, when someone dares to ask why, they break free from the chains of unexamined assumptions. Critical thinking skills are the essential tools for this journey. The world is full of information, but not all of it is true or helpful. In fact, much of it is designed to manipulate or mislead. So how does one begin to differentiate between fact and fiction? It starts with actively seeking alternative perspectives, being open to ideas that challenge existing beliefs, and learning to think independently. Critical thinking is about analyzing, questioning, and evaluating ideas rather than accepting them at face value. It's about developing the skill to sift through information and discern what aligns with truth, not just what sounds convenient or comfortable. History is full of people who challenged conventional thinking. One of the most famous examples is Socrates, the ancient Greek philosopher who spent his life questioning the beliefs and practices of Athenian society. He didn't just accept the prevailing wisdom, he questioned it, probed it, and forced others to think deeply about their own assumptions. He famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Socrates didn't just challenge the ideas of others, he challenged his own beliefs as well, leading to the development of philosophy as a discipline focused on critical thought and self-examination. By questioning societal norms and engaging in dialogue, Socrates helped shape the foundation of modern thought. But even in today's world, questioning is just as crucial. Take, for example, a time when you may have blindly accepted something only to later realize it didn't make sense. Perhaps it was a news story you once believed was true, or a popular opinion you followed simply because everyone else did. Then, one day you asked yourself, wait, is that really true? And upon further investigation, you discovered the truth wasn't as clear-cut as you had been led to believe. That moment of realization, when you see through the veil of programmed thinking, is the exact moment you begin to break free from the matrix. It's not an easy path to walk. Breaking free from the thought matrix takes courage, time, and effort. It requires learning to trust your own mind rather than relying on external sources for validation. But once someone starts questioning, exploring new perspectives, and developing critical thinking skills, they gain the power to truly reclaim their mind. After all, the only true freedom comes from the ability to think for yourself, independently, critically, and without the shackles of societal programming. Throughout this journey, we've uncovered a difficult truth. The thoughts people believe are uniquely their own are often shaped by external forces, media, culture, authority, and societal norms. These influences subtly guide what people think, how they act, and even how they see themselves. The media bombards them with narratives, shaping perceptions through repetition and manipulation. Culture installs default settings, dictating behavior from an early age. Authority figures, from experts to politicians, hold the power to influence decisions by simply being perceived as reliable. And then, there's the peer pressure that creates social feedback loops, pushing individuals to conform even when it doesn't align with their own desires. But here's the key takeaway. None of this has to be the final word. True independent thinking is not an automatic process. It requires intentional effort. The moment a person becomes aware of these influences, that's when real freedom begins. To be truly free in thought, one must actively question everything, not just the big issues or abstract concepts, but the seemingly small things too. Why do I believe this? Where did this opinion come from? These aren't just passing questions. They are the tools that separate independent thinkers from those who simply follow the herd. Critical thinking, questioning, and seeking alternative perspectives aren't just optional. They are essential to escaping the mental matrix. It's easy to fall into the trap of accepting popular beliefs, but it's far harder to take the road less traveled, where deeper understanding and personal responsibility for one's beliefs reside. Independent thinking isn't just about rejecting the mainstream. It's about actively engaging with ideas, analyzing them, and understanding their origins. It's about finding the courage to stand outside the boundaries set by culture, media, and society, and carving out a path based on personal truth, not external influence. Breaking free isn't an overnight transformation. It's a continual process of awareness and choice. But once someone starts questioning the status quo, once they begin to see beyond the conditioning, they realize something incredibly empowering. Their mind is their own. The beauty of reclaiming independent thought lies not in rejecting all that society offers, but in choosing what to embrace and what to reject with full understanding. Breaking free from the thought matrix takes courage and a willingness to question everything. Like and share this video to encourage others to think critically. For those seeking to understand the mysteries of life and death, explore our video on the truth about the void, what exists between life and death. Subscribe to stay connected to a community of seekers who, like you, are curious about the unknown.